Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome again to the poem of the day for today, Sunday, August 24th, 2025. Happy Sunday to everyone. I hope you have a restful and a peaceful day today before we start another work week this week. Despite it being Sunday and that I usually like to do something peaceful, pastoral, beautiful, bucolic, I've decided to start a sort of second series for the week. Last week we had an Emily Dickinson series, Monday through Friday. And this week I found a poem that I've only read once and I wanted to revisit. And it lends itself towards a weekly series because it's about 500 lines in length and is in about 7 parts. And I'm talking of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which was originally composed in 1798 and then had a revised or corrected text in 1834. And what I recall of having read this poem the first time many years ago was the way in which it reminded me of this, dark romanticism that you see in something like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which of course is written within 2 decades of this poem, as well as some of the darker moments of Moby Dick as well. So experiences with nature that are less fulfilling in the way that Wordsworth talked about with the daffodils yesterday, and more threatening and more about staring into the abyss. This poem is a little bit mad. There's a little bit of unhinged kind of craziness and insanity in it. It's really rather gothic, and I'm excited to visit it again. So today I'll read part 1, which is about 83 lines, I think, and offer some brief comments at the end. I think it'll be more worthwhile to comment at more length once we have finished the entire poem together. But let's go ahead and begin. So this is The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, part 1. It is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of 3. By thy long grey beard and glittering eye, now wherefore stoppest thou me? The bridegroom's doors are open wide, and I am next of kin. The guests are met, the feast is set. Mayst hear the merry din? He holds him with his skinny hand. There was a ship, quoth he. Hold off, unhand me, greybeard loon. Eftsoons his hand dropped he. He holds him with his glittering eye. The wedding guest stood still, and listens like a 3 years' child. The mariner hath his will. The wedding guest sat on a stone. He cannot choose but hear, and thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. The ship was cheered, the harbor cleared. Merrily did we drop below the kirk, below the hill, below the lighthouse top. The sun came up from the left, out of the sea came he, and he shone bright, and on the right went down into the sea. Higher and higher every day, till over the mast at noon, the wedding guest here beat his breast, for he had heard the loud bassoon. The bride hath paced into the hall, red as a rose is she, nodding their heads before her goes the merry minstrelsy. The wedding guest, he beat his breast, yet he cannot choose but hear, and thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. And now the storm blast came, and he was tyrannous and strong. He struck with his o'ertaking wings and chased us south along, with sloping masts and dipping prow, as who, pursued with yell and blow, still treads the shadow of his foe, and forward bends his head. The ship drove fast, loud roared the blast, and southward aye we fled. And now there came both mist and snow, and it grew wondrous cold, and ice mast high came floating by, as green as emerald. And through the drifts, the snowy cliffs did send a dismal sheen, nor shapes of men, nor beasts we ken. The ice was all between. The ice was here, the ice was there. The ice was all around. It cracked and growled and roared and howled like noises in a swoon. At length did cross an albatross. Thorough the fog it came. As if it had been a Christian soul, we hailed it in God's name. It ate the food it ne'er had eat, and round it flew. The ice did split with a thunder fit. The helmsman steered us through. And a good south wind sprung up behind. The albatross did follow. And every day, for food or play, came to the mariner's hollow. In mist or cloud, on mast or shroud, it perched for vespers 9, whiles all the night, through fog smoke white, glimmered the white moonshine. God save thee, ancient mariner, from the fiends that plague thee thus. Why lookest thou so? With my crossbow, I shot the albatross. So that's the end of part 1. Wow. I just love I again kind of recall with this almost Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, that there's a formal ceremony going on in like a large ornate dining hall, an important ritual, one of merriment and glad tidings that's interrupted. You could really kind of see, these doors bursting open as this crazy mariner comes in, and you can sense the agitation of the bridegroom and the wedding guest and the bride, as they leave, kind of pace about. You can almost imagine people looking at one another, with nervous sidelong glances as this man's going on. And yet they become really spellbound by this man's tale. I think partly in his insistence in telling it, but also partly in he's a good storyteller. He begins with these descriptions of nature that are personified in a way that kind of lulls the listener into a traditional romantic, poetic expression, something more like Wordsworth that we had yesterday when he's talking about the sun coming up, the sun going down, shining bright, right? Higher every day till over the mast at noon. Everything seems to be in order there, almost divine. And then the storm blast comes. And what's really cool about that is around line 45, 46, you might have noticed from the pattern of this poem that it's written in quatrains with a B, C, B rhyme scheme, and then a iambic tetrameter and then iambic trimeter alternating meter. And so there is, again, that kind of galloping rhythm that we talked about with Emily Dickinson, the kind of ballad rhythm that's there. But then that stanza right around line 45 is a 6-line stanza, as opposed to a quatrain. And that's right when he starts talking about the storm blast and the way that the storm blast stops them, gets them caught in the ice in a place that is desolate and empty of all life, human or beast. And the cabin fever starts to set in. And then there's all these fearful sounds, and we get this repetition of the ice was here, the ice was there, the ice was all around. And then this, really kind of terrifying personification of the ice cracking and growling and roaring and howling, which gives it a menace, but it also gives it, I think, a kind of demonic quality, or a demonic space to it. And then this albatross comes in, this big white seabird, through the fog, and they're so relieved to see it that they begin to almost sort of worship it like it's a Christian soul. And when you're desperate, you're willing to see things as omens. So as the warm south wind comes in to free them from being stuck, they think that the albatross brought it with them, brought the freedom of the warm air with it. But then we get this really stunning cliffhanger right at the end of part one, where he delays the reveal to say that, God save thee, fiends, the plague. Why do you look like this? And then we realize that it's because he shot the albatross, which they again had kind of imbued with this, spirituality, almost like a deity that was both a good omen, but also something that seemed to be able to affect their freedom from terror and near starvation. And so we're left at the end of part one wondering, why this man shot it. And then also thinking, if he has to barge into this wedding feast and share this story, this crazed story with them, that this is not just your normal hunting expedition of, oops, I shot a bird. There's a real strong sense of foreshadowing and foreboding at the end of this. And knowing the way in which nature has been personified as having almost an evil will towards the people on the ship, at least according to the mariner and the way that he understands it, we can begin to kind of predict what's to come in the successive parts of the poem. So that's part one of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, with a couple reflections on some of the structure and what happens, as well as how Coleridge is setting up the longer narrative here. Tomorrow we'll jump into part two, and I hope that you enjoyed this and that you join us for all 7 parts. This is a pretty important poem, a controversial one, but an important poem within the history of the English language, and I think it's one that everyone should read. So please use this as an excuse to experience Coleridge's work here. Thank you again, and have a lovely and a blessed and a peaceful Sunday.